So good afternoon, good morning, everyone. This is Teddy speaking from Microsoft. I am the low-code specialist here, and welcome to our November DUG4GOV webinar. So with us today, we have our customers from the Virginia IT Agency, who will be presenting on their Power Platform adoption kit. But before we dive into the content for today, we wanted to welcome our DUG4GOV representative Liz Hallen to say a few words about the DUG4GOV community. So thank you very much for being with us. Hopefully you had a great Thanksgiving with family and friends. And with that, I will pass it over to Liz. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Teddy. Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, wherever you're located. As Teddy mentioned, my name is Liz Hallen. I am the Vice President here at Dynamics User Group, and I'm going to apologize in advance. I have a little bit of a cold, so I'm going to do my best to get through this without sneezing or coughing all over everybody. But before we dive into the fantastic content that the folks from Virginia will be bringing you, I wanted to talk a little bit about Dynamics User Group. So we are a global community, and we host all of the individuals, whether you are a user or a partner, Microsoft employees around the globe that focus on the Microsoft Dynamics or 365, Dynamics GP, or Power Platform products. Our membership is free and it's based on an individual. We here believe very strongly in providing access to free education and content, and also networking with others in the community. So as an organization, we've been around for a little while, roots back to 1995, however, with full-time staff the last 3.5 years, and our community is continuing to grow. Currently, we have over 42,000 members, and would love to see all of you if you're not members today. So if you are not familiar with some of the things that we offer, this DUG4GOV meetup that we're all part of today is just one of our programs that we offer. We have several meetups around the globe, always free to attend, always free to learn, and feel free to check out our website for more information about other locations and other areas of interest there. In addition to that, we have also started a webinar program this year. Again, free content education on the core Microsoft Dynamics and Power Platform products. Our online discussion forums are a great way for you to continue to network and communicate with members of the community when we're not all gathered virtually or in person. Our Team Up program is one of the ways that our organization is funded, so a huge thanks to our Team Up partners. But for those of you that are customers and are interested in looking for maybe possible other services or solutions to your existing product, our Team Up partners are a great resource for you to go to. All of our DUG4GOV meetings are also recorded, as well as several of our other educational pieces of content, and you can find all of those on our YouTube channel. And last but not least, we are also probably most well known for our conferences. So we host DynamicsCon Live and DynamicsCon Virtual. We started out hosting the virtual event, and we will have a virtual event in November. But the next event will actually be coming up next May in Denver, Colorado. So if you're all able to join us in person, we would love to see you. We will have over 220 sessions in Denver. I have a promo code here on the screen for you to get $100 off of your registration. And if you feel like you are a subject matter expert or would like to try your hand at speaking, we do have our call for sessions open right now. They actually will close on Thursday this week. So Thursday, November 30th is your last chance to get a submission for a potential topic for the May event. And with that, last but not least, if you can't join us in Denver, our next virtual event will be in November of next year. And again, this is a free event. And in past years, we've had over 5,000 community members join us. We'll have educational sessions on all the products I've discussed before. And this event is very special because this is very community driven. So all of the session submissions come from members of our community, and we also allow you to vote on all of those sessions. And the top voted sessions are the ones that you'll see on the final agenda. Our session submission for the virtual event will open probably in about April of next year. So stay tuned for more details on that. And I will drop in the chat a link to our website, as well as how you can connect with me if you have any additional questions. Would love to hear from all of you. And again, thank you so much for being here and part of the DUG4GOV community. We really appreciate it. And I will pass it back to you, Teddy.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz. We always appreciate our DUG4GOV community. So just a last housekeeping item before we get started. So like Liz was mentioning, DUG4GOV is a national Dynamics and Power Platform user group for state and local government agencies and organizations. We meet once a month on the fourth Tuesday of every month from January through June, taking July off, and then from August until November, taking December off. So next month we will be off for the holiday break, but then we will reconvene in January of 2024. So be on the lookout for more information on our next webinar. So with that, I wanted to pass it over to our guests from the Virginia IT Agency Business Platform Solution team. Now, as you saw kind of on the DUG4GOV Meetup link, that the team will share their Power Platform Adoption Kit, which is really a comprehensive guide for agencies such as yourselves to get started with using the platform and enabling your agencies and customers to use the platform as well. So the adoption kit covers topics like strategies and guidelines, best practices and learnings, agency level governance, which is something we've heard a lot about, roles and responsibilities of the environment and admin teams, as well as any tools and resourcing that VITA has put together for their agencies. So without further ado, I wanted to turn it over to Chris Jenkins, who is the BPS manager for VITA. So Chris, thank you for joining us, and over to you.
All right, thank you, Teddy. I am gonna get my presentation loaded.
Perfect. We see it on our screens. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, thanks again, Teddy. As Teddy mentioned, my name is Chris Jenkins. I'm one of the business platform solutions managers at VITA, and our team. I have a team with me here today, and we're very excited to spend a little bit of time with you talking about our experiences with the Power Platform. I'm going to take a little bit of time, very briefly tell you about VITA and who we are and who we serve. And then jump in and talk about our experiences with the Power Platform, our community of practice. As Teddy mentioned, we're going to take a look at our adoption handbook, and then some of the tools we've developed for agencies, including the Center of Excellence and Power Platform Resource Hub we've created. And then lastly, if we have time, talk a little bit about our Learning Pathways website. Before I jump in, I do an important note is that VITA is about 1 year into this journey with Power Platform. We started planning about this time last year. We started planning the service actually before I joined the team, so I showed up just in time to take a victory lap. But the team did a lot of work before I joined, and we launched the service in July of 2023 through the VITA catalog, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in just a minute. And so a lot of the resources we're going to share with you today, they've been developed and deployed within the last 6 months. And I think everybody on my team would agree they're a great starting point, but we've already started looking at opportunities based on feedback we've received to how we can refine and evolve these as we grow this platform. Quickly, around who is VITA and who do we serve? We're the centralized IT agency for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we abbreviate Commonwealth of Virginia because it's a mouthful, so we'll just call it the COV from now on. VITA has a little over 270 employees and contractors. And we primarily focus in 4 core areas around cybersecurity, infrastructure, governance, and procurement. And talk about procurement, that is, VITA has a lot of statewide contracts that agencies can leverage, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So we serve 67 executive branch agencies, a total of a little over 55,000 COV employees. And then also you'll notice on here on the next slide where we list some non-executive branch agencies like higher education and localities. And while they're not technically in scope for VITA, we do work with them and they can leverage some of our resources, including our statewide contracts, which can serve as a procurement vehicle for these localities and higher education institutions. And then lastly, you could do a whole presentation on our service model, but I'm just going to quickly explain that we are a multi-supplier model, which means we have 9 towers of services that are under contract through different organizations. And we employ a single multi-source integrator. Currently, the contract is with SAIC, and while VITA owns the contracts, MSI manages the operational aspects of the day-to-day operation of these different towers for us. So speaking of procurement, we leverage our volume purchases to negotiate the best prices we can with different vendors. And then we offer these services to agencies through our product catalog. Our catalog currently has over 1,000 SKUs, and they range from computer hardware and software to printers, data and voice network services, data center and cloud storage, security services, and then lastly, enterprise solutions, which is where my team falls. And we use a chargeback rate that allows us to recover the majority of our overhead and operating expenses for VITA. We're not out to turn a profit, but we do have to cover the cost of operating our agency. So that's just a little bit about VITA and our service model. And then my team specifically, we are a relatively small team. There's just 5 of us, including myself. And we manage and administer the COV Microsoft tenant. And we primarily serve in a governance role, and we provide a framework of best practices and guardrails that agencies can use as they adopt the platform. We don't necessarily get down deep in the weeds with agencies in the development of applications or solutions, but we will work with them on a consulting basis. And in general, just help provide resources if they get hung up with something, provide resources, usually through Microsoft or some of our vendor partners for people who can jump in and help them with that kind of work. We encourage adoption of the platform by hosting workshops and other learning opportunities. And we also facilitate the COV community of practice, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit more in just a minute. And then lastly, I think, if you ask somebody on our team, what are we really trying to do in the Commonwealth? Our team really wants to be seen as the trusted collaborative partner for agency IT administrators and for their environment admins and to some extent for their makers. A little bit about our tenant. As I mentioned, there's 67 agencies sharing one tenant. We have, I mentioned before, 55,000 executive branch employees. Our default environment is called DUG4GOV. So you'll hear as we'll talk about DUG4GOV. That is our default environment for the Power Platform. And then just a high level look at what we have in the tenant. We have over 575 environments, 680 app makers, over 5,000 apps, and currently over 8,000 flows in the tenant. So talking a little bit specifically about the COV Power Platform, and I'm going to start off a little bit with our, we'll call them opportunities, challenges, depends on how you want to look at it. I think from my team, if you ask anybody on my team and you'll have a chance to talk with them, one of the biggest challenges we face, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, is that we have multi-agencies sharing a tenant. And then the opportunity there is it allows us to apply uniform governance, data loss prevention, and all of those guardrails that we want to keep in place. But the downside, the potential downside of that is managing the permissions and managing and maintaining security and privacy with all of these agencies that are sharing this tenant. I think another challenge for us is managing licenses, because it is a shared tenant and we are purchasing licenses on behalf of agencies, and then we're assigning those licenses within the tenant. When we purchase them from our reseller, the licenses show up in the tenant, but they don't necessarily have a name to go with them. So we're having to employ tracking mechanisms to make sure that agencies are getting the licenses that they've purchased. And another challenge in that area is particularly for licenses or for our SKUs that are consumption-based. So an example might be your Power Virtual Agent, your chatbot sessions. So when those arrive in the tenant, being purchased by a specific agency, making sure that those are being consumed by the agency that purchased them. So those are some of the challenges, and then just in general, managing the default environment, managing the DUG4GOV environment for us presents a couple of challenges in finding ways to give agencies visibility and oversight so that they can see what their app developers are doing in the default environment, but restricting it so they can't really interact with any other agencies' apps and flows in the environment. And I've got Gilles with me. He's going to talk a little bit more about those tools and how we're leveraging the Center of Excellence to give agencies a little more visibility. And then lastly, John Gordon is going to share some information with you around our environment strategies and how we're encouraging agencies, if they have the ability, not to rely on the default environment, but to establish their own productivity environment where they can have full control over what their app makers are doing, and then get away from some of these challenges that we have with the default environment. And then lastly, as far as opportunities, we've got agencies, 60 plus agencies, they're on a spectrum. We've got agencies like the Virginia Department of Transportation, which probably collectively has more experience with Power Platform than VITA does. They've been doing this for a number of years. They have a lot of expertise. And then we have other agencies who are just getting started. And in some cases, they're coming to us and saying, hey, I've heard about this. I don't know what it is, but I want to use it. So we're looking for ways to help them leverage the platform. And then I also would point out that because we had a lot of early adopters, they got out ahead of our governance. So I told you we started this about a year ago. So some of our agencies have been using the platform a lot longer than that. So now we're going back and doing some cleanup. For example, having to go back and look at some of what connectors are available in the default environment and maybe start paring that down a little bit to put some extra guardrails in place. Our community of practice, we had our first community of practice meeting in March of 2023. We're very fortunate at VITA to have executive buy-in at the highest levels. Our CIO, Bob Osmond, is a huge proponent of the Power Platform, and he and several members of the chief executive team have strongly advocated for this community of practice model and fostering adoption through agencies working together. So much so that several of the OKRs for our directorate are directly tied to how many participants we have in the COP and how many people are participating in our events and our learning opportunities. We've currently got about 300 members in our COP, and we initially started off targeting IT leaders, environment admins, and pro developers. And now that we've grown it a little bit, we're broadening our reach and reaching out and inviting some non-pro developers and business users to join the community of practice as well. Currently, we meet once a month, and looking to the future, we want to encourage agencies to take a more active role. we started off with VITA providing a lot of information during these sessions, very much kind of a lecture style, sit and learn about the governance. And what we want to transition to is inviting agencies to lead meetings, talk about what they've been doing. We've had a couple, we had VDOT come and present last month, and the month before that, we had our Office of Data Governance come and present. So we're looking to make it more interactive and have more agency involvement in leading some of the meetings. And then in between meetings, we're looking to add some informal hands-on workshops in the form of lunch and learn sessions in between our regularly monthly sessions. Additional resources that we have for agencies. We have a COP team. I'm going to quickly show you the team site that we're using to administer our community of practice. We've got our adoption handbook. We have a Power Platform hub that's built on SharePoint, where we're using the Center of Excellence. And then lastly, we have our Learning Pathways website. Our COP team, we're using the Microsoft Teams platform. And I've just highlighted a couple things that we've got here. The Center of Excellence is the first button, the first section that's highlighted. We are providing access to the environment admins through the team so that they can see the dashboards for the Center of Excellence. Each one of our agencies in this larger highlighted section, each one of our agencies, we've set up a private or shared channel with them so that they can communicate directly with the Platform Solutions team and ask us questions and have general conversations with us. And then we've also created a community share channel, which we just launched earlier this month, where we're encouraging agencies to interact directly with each other with VITA as the broker and exchange ideas and maybe share some solutions. So we're very excited to have agencies getting more involved in that. And then the last thing I wanted to call out on the COP team is that we've done some work with Power Automate to pull relevant articles from the Message Center and post them to a SharePoint list and also post them to this Message Center channel on our Microsoft team. And by doing that, we're allowing all of the COP members access to the information and updates without us having to assign or maintain admin or reader roles for those people in the tenant. So if they're part of the COP team, they can automatically have access to these articles and updates. I'm going to go through somewhat quickly. Teddy, I believe, has shared or is going to share a copy of our handbook with you. I'm going to go through and just highlight a couple of the sections very quickly before I turn it over to a couple of my teammates. The why we did this is after dozens of meetings with agencies, we noticed some recurring trends in the questions they were asking us, and we decided to put together this adoption kit to answer their questions and also address some of the concerns. The first draft was shared with our COP in July, and we're currently working on some updates to the document that we'll have out in the first quarter of 2024. And I think one of the things we'll focus on is, one of the bigger challenges as we rolled out the platform is helping agencies understand what VITA's role is versus what's the role of their admin team and their environment administrator. So one of the things I'll touch on is a RACI chart that we've included to help them understand the who does what. So I'm going to stop sharing this and switch over, hopefully, to the handbook itself. And Teddy, would you just let me know if you can see the handbook PDF?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
You might want to zoom in just a touch, but yes, we can see your screen.
All right. See if I can make this a little bigger. All right, so to start off at the top, the navigation, we kind of broke it up thinking that different audiences we were going to have. So for our beginners, we have a getting started section where we just give them an overview. If you don't even know what Power Platform is, we've got some resources here to help you. The middle two sections are for folks who have maybe been using it for a while, for environment administrators, for IT leaders, where we talk about the implementation and governance. And then lastly, we have a section where we're providing links to pretty much all the resources that we've been talking about here today. So just to give you an idea of what's in Getting Started, it is very basic. A lot of it is provided, through learn.microsoft.com. We're just consolidating it all here in one document, helping them understand what the platform is. We've got, just key terms that they're going to hear. We also talk a little bit, I know this is painfully small to see even on my screen, but talk about the licensing and help them understand, because everybody in the COV has a G5 license, help them understand, hey, what do you have access to through the G5 license, and what do you need, what do you need a premium license for? Moving a little further down, this is where we dive into the roles and responsibilities, and just first calling out who, and Teddy, can you guys see this okay? Do I need to make it bigger?
I can see it.
Okay. So, just thinking about things like having an agency executive sponsor, involving your information, we call them ISOs, your information security officer from each agency, your Power Platform admin team, your business unit, your stakeholders, and then your champions, who are the people in your agency that are going to really get out there and evangelize the platform. So once we established the roles, then we took a first swipe, and this is very much our first swipe at creating a RACI chart, so that we've taken those roles across the top. So you got VITA BPS, which is my team on the left, the agency business unit users, and then the agency Power Platform admin team. I don't want to read the whole thing to you, but we've just kind of gone through and really tried to highlight that VITA as the central IT, you'll see that our responsibility and accountability primarily falls at tenant level administration, at reviewing and sharing information about the platform, and then fulfilling the requests that we receive. So we're really trying to drive home the point that as the central IT agency, we're operating at the tenant level. We set up environments for you. We establish the basic settings for those guidelines, and then we assign an environment administrator. And that's where we transition responsibility and accountability over to the Power Platform admin team for each agency. Then we go a little bit into governance. We'll talk about the COE, which Gilles is going to demo for you, just listing out some of our DLP policies and guidelines. There's a whole section on that on the SharePoint Hub, which John is going to cover. And then lastly, getting into environment strategy, and again, helping them understand ALM and how to use how and when to use a productivity environment. And John's going to talk a little bit more about that. And I've gone probably about 5 minutes over where we needed to be. So what I would say is, I think, like I said, Teddy either has or will share a copy of the handbook with you, and I'd certainly be willing to set up a time if somebody wanted to talk one-on-one. We'd certainly be willing to set up a time to discuss this with any agency who was interested in doing something similar. So let me get my presentation back up. And John, this is your 2-minute warning that I'm about to call on you. So one of the resources that we set up, one of the first resources we set up was a SharePoint site. We call it our Power Platform Hub, and this is a lot of the documentation that is in the handbook is actually just links back to this platform, back to our SharePoint site. So again, the handbook is really curating and organizing resources for them that are already available through a whole bunch of other sources, but just giving them that one thing that we can leave behind with them when we have that first conversation with them. So John, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite you to take over.
Okay. Can you guys hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So as Chris was saying, hey everyone, this is John Gordon. I'm on the BPS team. a global administrator within our tenant. And so what I want to just show is what we call our Power Platform SharePoint Hub site. So this was a site that we put together just to kind of house information around how we are governing the Power Platform within the Commonwealth. So a lot of the frequently asked questions that we get, we wanted to be able to point people to a centralized site where they could go to get that information, and even point them to this where they could just kind of browse and click through and see what we've published to get a better idea on how we've implemented the Power Platform within the Commonwealth. What I'm going to do is just kind of show a couple of the highlights or centralized or important areas, I would say, on this site. And we kind of have this homepage here, and we use the SharePoint navigation to kind of break it down by different areas. So there's the getting started, there's help and learning. This area here is probably where the bulk of the information is, and where I'm going to spend time today. And I want to start with the message center, because this is something that Chris brought up. You know, within the Commonwealth, we have a small team of administrators, and then our customer agencies, you know, they have administrative rights within their environments, but that's it. So they don't have access to the 365 Admin Center. They don't have access to Azure Active Directory, and they don't have access to view the messages that come out in the Message Center on a regular basis. So this is something that we set up for them. It's a flow that basically pulls the information from the Message Center and posts it to a SharePoint list, so they can get in and see all the different messages as they come out. This other section here is just around environment settings. So, you know, we had to do basically a security baseline with the Power Platform, and there's some settings that we apply across the board for all environments. And so this is where we kind of post information around those settings, just to let the customers know what we're doing and why and how those settings are set up. And some of those are around session timeouts, making sure that sessions time out in accordance with our security policies here at the Commonwealth. Also around blocked file types. So there's some file types that are blocked by default. Our security team has added some additional file types that they deem necessary to be blocked by default. So that's what this section is just kind of covering some of those high-level security baseline configurations that apply across all environments. And again, this site is just a way that we communicate this information out to the agencies. Probably the most important area within this site is our environment strategy, because that's something that's very important for us and for customers to understand and have an approach and a strategy on how they're going to use environments. I think, you know, we all know what environments are. They're containers where our apps and our flows can live. And for our perspective purposes, you know, we've kind of developed this strategy as a way to help us and help our customers. So at a high level, you know, we have the default environment, and in our case, we call it DUG4GOV. And, you know, as you probably know, this is where everyone is a maker. And that's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Because it's good for building, you know, personal productivity, for testing things out. Where it's not so good is everyone has access, or everyone potentially has access to any apps and flows within the default environment. And so we find ourselves in scenarios where, you know, agencies don't really have control over the apps and flows that are built in the default environment because they don't have admin rights there. And so one of the core components of our environment strategy is really because we can't block, you know, by design, that's just the way the product was designed. Everyone is a maker in the default environment, and we don't have a way to restrict that. But what we can do is we can encourage each agency to have their own environments. And that's the location where we encourage their apps and flows to be built. So we've kind of an imaginary line here between the DUG4GOV default environment and then the agency managed environments. So our team, the BPS team, manages the DUG4GOV environment, and each agency has one or more agency managed environments. And just to kind of talk to DUG4GOV, this is like I said, the default environment. It's good for extending SharePoint lists or workflows on SharePoint lists. It is supported by our centralized team. Like I said, everyone is a maker. And one of the things that we've done with this default environment is to try to implement a more restrictive DLP policy. Because everyone is a maker there and because everyone has access there, we wanted to make sure we only allowed certain connectors. And I think, basically all the connectors that are unblockable are allowed there. Anything that connects to data within our tenant, all of the Microsoft connectors, they're all allowed there. But the approach was to try to block or restrict access to any of the other connectors. And if agencies need to use those connectors, that's where we encourage them to use their agency managed environment, and those connectors could be allowed there. We haven't blocked everything yet because, like Chris said, we kind of rolled out this service only within the past year. There's some apps and flows that are using connectors that we would like to move. We can't yet. So that's kind of our ongoing maintenance of communicating out with the agencies, what the purpose is of the DUG4GOV, the default environment, and where they should be building their apps and flows. When it comes to the agency environments, we really kind of break it down into these three categories. And that would be the productivity environments, centrally managed environments, and Dataverse for Teams environments. So, this is a term that we came up with for productivity environments, and really it's very similar to the default environment, except that it's specific to a single agency. So each agency would like for each of them to have a productivity environment, and that's kind of their landing environment or default environment where all of their apps and flows can live, unless they have a need to have a centrally managed environment. And the key difference is, centrally managed means there would be a centralized team within that agency, either IT within that agency or some team there that manages those environments. And these are typically, where we would have, if you have a need for application lifecycle management or ALM, that's where you would use a centrally managed environment where you can have, separation of duties and, your developers are building the apps and flows, and then a different resource is responsible for moving it from dev to test and production. And then the third type is just Dataverse for Teams. We have a ton of teams within our tenant, and some of those teams do have Dataverse enabled. And so that's kind of the third type of agency managed environments. But just to kind of highlight some of the differences, these are all three of these are managed. Well, all three of these are managed by an agency resource. The centrally managed is managed usually by IT within the agency. And then the Dataverse for Teams is managed by whoever that team owner is. So difference in terms of who owns it and who supports it. The DLP, this is where, we allow a little bit more freedom in terms of what connectors are available by default for the productivity and centrally managed. And, we do restrict which connectors are allowed. But if an agency has a business case or a use case where they need a specific connector, it's not like we're trying to prevent them from using them. We just have an approval process in place and an approval mechanism for them to be able to use those connectors. And it starts, basically at the agency. The agency security team needs to approve the use of a connector. Then it comes to VITA. The VITA security team reviews it, and once they approve it, and then it's added to the agency DLP to be able to use those different connectors. So that's kind of a high level breakdown of our environment strategy. We really encourage, we can't force, but we encourage agencies to each have their own agency managed environments. It gives them more control. It gives them visibility into what apps and flows are being used there. And then, like I said, the breakdown is, the default environment is your productivity one. For more mission critical apps or high visibility apps that need, an ALM process, that's where you would have your centrally managed environments. And then Dataverse for Teams is just for those teams that have apps and flows associated with them that require a Dataverse for Teams environment. So that's kind of high level environment strategy. Was that you, Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's awesome, John. Thank you so much. We've got about 10 minutes left before we do Q&A, so I want to switch gears and give Gilles a chance to talk about the Center of Excellence and the work that he's done in developing and extending some tools. So let me get my screen back up. Gilles, that's your 1 minute, your 1 minute warning before I put you on the spot. So Gilles, did you want me to just share the slides that you've created, or did you want to drive yourself?
Yeah, if you can leave the slide up,
Okay.
And then I will switch. Okay, so what we have done over the last close to 10 months now is to implement the Power Platform COE. Center of Excellence Toolkit. So hopefully most of you know what the COE is. If you don't, you can go to GitHub Power Platform Center of Excellence Toolkit. It's a free toolkit developed by different consultants. They're meeting, I think they're meeting on a monthly basis. And they come up with a new version, I would say every 4 to 5 weeks. Okay. Something to be aware of in case you're using the COE is the COE is being developed on a commercial tenant, not fully tested on GCC. So, it's not unusual for us to find some very small bugs. Because we're running all those application and flow in GCC. The thing I would outline is that every time we're reporting a bug to the COE toolkit development team, within the next version, the bug is fixed. Okay, so even though they're a small team, they are very reactive and they welcome any feedback for improvement or enhancement. Okay. So what is the COE? So the COE is actually a collection of application and flows, and it's really to empower the business and the Power Platform community, no matter what your role is to empower the user, trying to share information out, trying to provide visibility in what other community members do, what type of application they build, what type of flows, how are those environments set up, what type of DLPs are in place, what type of connectors, and so forth. The COE comes with a set of Power BI reports, okay? And again, as long as you have a Power BI Pro license, you can set up your Power BI Pro workspace, configure or upload the report, and give all your members access to it, So some of the things we have issues with the COE and just the way it was built, okay? Because we in GOV4GOV, it's a single tenant that is being shared with 67 plus executive branch. We just cannot provide the same level of access to all environment administrators. If we were going to provide access to the COE apps the way it is built, that will mean an environment admin from agency A, in our case, for example, DSS, social services, could actually manage permissions or ownership of application and flows developed by DMV. Okay. So what we have done is that we have a look at how we can actually extend some of those applications without breaking the structure of the kit, meaning without breaking the structure of the schema associated with the toolkit. And why it's critical to do this, and Chris, let me know at the time, why it is critical to do this is because if you start changing the schema, you're creating an unmanaged layer, and any new upgrade of the toolkit will fail, okay? So I'm going to take over the screen, and Teddy, you tell me if you can see my screen.
We can see your screen, Gilles.
Okay, so here what I've done, I'm connecting to our tenant in the context of a service admin administrator. So I see everything. I see those 577 plus environment and so forth. So some of the tools we actually modify is something we call the agency Power Platform admin view, okay? And what this application does, it's actually an out-of-the-box model-driven app that the COE toolkit built, but we actually customize it, okay? I mean, we actually extended the application to provide a read-only interface. So having a read-only interface allows us to share this model-driven app with all agency environment administrators without any concern that an environment administrator is going to change anything about the flow, a PVA bot, an app. No concerns that an agency admin will be able to change permission or take ownership of an application. We modified the navigation a little bit. So if, as any agency administrator, I want to look into a flow that has been developed by any agency out there, I can actually see the details of the flow. I can see what type of connections are being used, but I cannot modify anything about the flow. I don't even have access to the flow. I just have access to the metadata about the flow, okay? Same thing about environments. One of the typical use case for our agency administrator is that, like John told you about our environment strategy, you can have one or more productivity environment, you can have many centrally managed environments. As an environment admin, I'm not going to have access to all the apps and flows being developed, you know, by the across all those different productivity and centrally managed environment. By using this application here, I can actually filter. So, for example, if I'm interested in environment that one of our biggest agency, VITA, has done, I can see all the environments that the Virginia Department of Transportation has. I see where all the main apps are being built, how many flows, and then I can actually export that data to Excel and then upload that Excel file to one of my communication sites or one of my V. Team sites, so I can share that information with all the V. Folks, you know. So again, only environment administrators have access to this app here, okay? So it's a great way to give visibility into everything your community is developing, okay? So that was one example of the app. Another example of what we have done.
Gilles, 3 minutes,
yes?
3 minute warning, 3 minute warning.
All right, so I'm going to present only one app. This one is an out-of-the-box app. It's an app that an environment admin could use to actually modify ownership and permission on an app or on the flow, okay? What we have done, we extended this app, okay? And we wanted to add security trimming on the environment side. So because this one is actually a canvas app, not a model-driven app, we were able to use another connector here to actually provide that security trimming. So here I'm running it in the context of a service, in the context of a Power Platform service admin account. I'm going to show you the same app in the context of an agency, environment admin. So I have access to only those 4 environments. When I go to my app, I can only control applications or flows in the 4 environments I have access to. So again, we're using some of those applications and flows developed by the COE team, and we extend them. And where we can, we add that security trimming layer, if you want, to protect what an environment administrator can do. I apologize. I know I went really fast, but I only had a few minutes to explain the type of work we have done over the last 10 months.
Yeah, no, Gilles, that's excellent. Thank you so much to Chris, to John, Dameon, Naveen on the BPS team as well. I think this is fantastic content that I know a lot of our customers across the state and local government community has. I've heard this from many different customers about how to incorporate a governance strategy kind of similar to what you have done. And I think the practices that you've shared are really kind of those recommended practices, even that we at Microsoft would recommend as well. So thank you very much for going through that. I know we have just a few minutes left, so I wanted to open it up to Q&A and allow the community to kind of ask some questions of our guests. So I know that there were a couple questions that were asked in the chat. So
yeah,
Doug, you want to moderate?
Yeah. So Chris, there was actually 2, both from Sarah, really good questions. So the first one of which, have you faced any challenges when leadership within the agencies or others maybe look at a competitor technology that shares functionality not in a sovereign cloud, like in a commercial cloud? And how would you address that, knowing that you're in a GCC environment or a sovereign cloud scenario?
Chris, you're on mute.
Let me make sure I'm understanding correctly. So are we talking about stuff that's comparing what's available in GCC to what they're seeing in commercial? Or are we comparing somebody goes out and sees a competitor, a competing platform?
I would say both, right? But
Okay.
The competing platform would be in a non-sovereign cloud, right?
Yeah.
And so, how do you address that?
So for that, VITA tries to be platform agnostic. So in our catalog, you would you would find a host of products, and then agencies also are not restricted to what's in the catalog. For example, we've got agencies using Salesforce for low code. What we try to do on my team is understand the business need and help them decide if the Dynamics platform or the Power Platform is the best use case for it. And the way we do that is by always focusing on its ability to integrate and leverage the G5 license and all of the other Microsoft tools. But if an agency leader believes that Salesforce or some other product is the way they want to go, we typically don't try to sway them. That may not be the right answer, but that's the way we operate.
It's a good answer, but will you discuss kind of the different compliance aspects of each of those different platforms?
Well, yeah. So for the main benefit, if they choose Dynamics, is that it's a VITA catalog item, which means they don't have to go through any security and oversight processes. As part of deploying the platform, we've basically pre-approved it. We've developed a system security plan, and they can leverage that system security plan and generally meet all of the audit requirements from Commonwealth Security without jumping through any additional hoops. If they were to go with a product like Salesforce, which is not in our catalog, then they have to go through a somewhat lengthy process to get it approved by Commonwealth Security. And then also there's an ongoing fee for Commonwealth Security to keep that platform under what we call under oversight or governance, where they're monitoring what's happening in the platform.
Gotcha.
So it's definitely in their best interest to use a platform that's already in the VITA catalog. And right now, for LCAP, that would be Power Platform and Dynamics.
And then how do you cover scenarios where an agency might come to you and say they went to a Microsoft event that was commercial based and they see some feature that's not yet available in GCC? How do you kind of handle those discussions?
Well, Teddy will tell you because we just had an event, and so anytime we're in control of the presentation, we do call out what's available in GCC and what's not, and try to give them some realistic timeline. And then, the only thing an agency, I feel the only thing we can do is explain to them why, the why behind why some features are not available, understanding that GCC there's an accreditation process that it's designed to keep our citizens' information and data secure. That's really all you can do, and sharing any opportunity we have, sharing that roadmap with them, having meetings, talking about it in the COP, being a good partner with Microsoft, and sometimes even bringing people in from Microsoft to talk to them about what's available, when it'll be available, and what it's going to look like in GCC.
Great. And then the second question, which I think is really good, and a lot of my customers have this question, is how are you handling support for makers that are not platform related per se, but more how to, I've got a problem with a flow, I need kind of a pro dev or somebody more experienced than me to help me build this. How are you handling that?
Well, it's tricky because, we said we want to be a trusted partner, and sometimes being a trusted partner means you have to do some stuff you wouldn't normally do. In general, my team, we're not large enough. We don't have enough people to get involved in helping them troubleshoot individual apps or flows. As a general rule, we will spend about an hour with somebody. If somebody reaches out to us, we'll commit 1 hour and say, hey, if you can talk to us about it in an hour, somebody from my team will meet with you. We'll try to understand it. We try, because we're the central IT agency and most of our customer agencies have their own IT departments, we try to involve the IT department from the supporting agency and see if there's a resource that they can provide. But for some of our smaller agencies, it's usually 1 or 2 people. And in those cases, we really have to take it on a case-by-case basis. We have reached out to Microsoft. In some cases, we've allowed some of our agencies to use some of our support hours, some of our DSE hours, to get them a limited amount of help if it's an app that's become critical to their agency.
Is there any peer-to-peer help in your community of practice yet?
Well, that's what we just launched. So we just started this community shared channel in hopes that some of these agencies will be able to help each other. So maybe ask us in 6 months how that's working out. So we're optimistic, but you never know what's gonna happen.
Okay, and then one last question. I know we're out of time, but this is an important one. So what are your kind of thoughts on Copilot? I mean, obviously not yet in GCC. Some aspects are starting to, trickle in, I would say. But kind of what is the state's approach? What's your approach to adoption of Copilot across the entire platform?
So I'm going to invite some people from my team to jump in. We just attended a multi-day workshop with Microsoft so we could begin to understand Copilot and what it's going to look like, and what are some of the caveats. In general, there's been a lot of interest in Copilot. People are hearing about it and they come back and ask when it's going to be available. So my team literally we just finished yesterday with the last part of the session, kind of developing our plan. The first step was for us to understand what's going to be in it, what's going to be available, what are the costs going to be, what are the licensing, and then how do we build some governance framework around how it's going to be used. But we are literally just getting started with it at this point, trying to be ready by the spring to summer when it actually becomes available to GCC customers.
So I know some customers across the country have kind of come up with this concept of a separate commercial tenant as what we call an innovation island, where you kind of have access to some newer stuff. Is that something the state's investigated at all?
It's not something we're doing. I mean, I have had a couple people reach out to me individually, and my advice to them was to go out and get get an account of their own, kind of a test account. But no, the Commonwealth is not set up a sandbox or a commercial test environment for agencies. It may be something we look into. Like I said, we're literally just learning about it. So we're going to rely on Microsoft to help guide us through developing the guardrails and the framework for it.
Yeah, just for everyone else on the call, the concept is you just get a separate commercial tenant. It's not integrated into your existing GCC tenant. We call it kind of Innovation Island, where it's just meant for learning and kind of policy adoption, because we know a lot of times policies take a while to get kind of crafted at the state and county and city level. And so again, a learning environment that people can start to play with. So if anybody's interested in that, reach out to your Microsoft team and we'll be happy to get you more information on that. Teddy, you want to wrap us up?
Great. Thank you very much, Doug. And thank you very much to the VITA VPS team for jumping on and sharing with us what you've learned through the adoption of the Power Platform and how you are empowering your agencies across the Commonwealth to build low-code solutions on the platform. We really appreciate your time, the guidance that you've shared with us, the learnings that you've shared with us, because I know, from working with other customers such as yourselves, that a lot of people are going through very similar challenges and opportunities as well. So, thank you very much again for all that you've shared with us. Really appreciate it. And so that wraps up our DUG4GOV webinar for today in November. Again, we will be off for the holidays in December and we will reconvene in January. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, for staying with us, and we look forward to seeing you all again in the new year. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Hey, and just for everybody's benefit, we'll keep the chat going live so you can still look at the chat after the fact. In fact, Chris, there's a couple of messages in there that are kind of directed at you about chargeback models and some other things. So if you get a second, if you could review that chat after we close, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect, everyone. Thank you.